This is my first time doing this on my
Oh
own.
my God, this is my first time doing it. I'm so nervous.
But there's like truly no better guest to have on the podcast than Congresswoman Joyce Beatty of my hometown Congresswoman, and candidate for DNC Vice Chair, which I'm so excited about, which I definitely want to talk to you about. But we were just saying earlier before we started, when I was 19 and like a baby organizer in Columbus, I would beg to go to meetings that you were running because I just wanted to see you, and you just cut this figure. I think you were the minority leader at the time.
I was.
In the Ohio Senate.
House.
Yeah,
Ohio
House. And you were just this icon. You are an icon in Columbus. And so all the young organizers, we were all obsessed with you, and all the young staffers. And so I remember once, and I got to tell this story at the White House when you brought all the business leaders during your OSU era, that I had this boss, Randy, and I begged to come to this meeting that Joyce was running. And he's like, fine, but you can't talk. You are not senior enough to be at this meeting, but I will allow you to come, but you have to sit in the back and you have to not talk. And I was like, fine, no problem, deal. And about halfway through the meeting, Joyce just looks over at me and is like, why are you not speaking?
Right. You always talk. You're brilliant. Please address my guest here. I remember that.
And you were like, don't come to meetings and don't participate.
Right.
Don't come to
You've
meetings when
earned
you
your
have
way,
something to contribute.
And you really did. And it's really funny that here we sit decades later, and we so vividly remember those stories. I remember the meetings with the young organizers coming in. And here's the thing you probably didn't know. I looked up to you all as much as I later found out how excited you all were to be in the room with me. I was always excited to have the organizers there, the young people, and we just meshed together.
Yeah.
And I still stay in contact with all of you as I've watched you go on and lead this world and still include me in things. So
it's so special. And this is a hard business. And I know that for as many people as there are who are willing to look out and who do look out for people, there's a lot of people who don't. And so being able to say that over the course of 20 years and as I was growing my career, I could call you, I could ask you questions, I could, you could get me out of a couple corners I managed to walk myself into.
It's what we do when you really believe in engagement and when you really believe that you can make a difference, and especially for people who look like you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important for women to be able to be in the movement, but to know there's someone just to call and say hello or say, hey, I have this idea. Or did you see my podcast? As I did. And I saw the podcast that you were doing, and I was hollering and screaming, and everybody ran and said, well, what's happening? I said, it's Carrie, it's Carrie. And they looked at me. And then everybody said, oh, my God, she's brilliant.
Aww.
And that was folks younger than you and I. And so that's how we continue to make sure that we continue to organize. We stay in the fight. You went on to the White House, and I was never so proud when I got that call.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, and so you always, on an individual level, but also sort of on a party level, are always looking for ways to contribute. And I guess, Brad and I are doing a series where we've interviewed most of the candidates for chair, and we're not going to probably interview all the candidates for vice chair because there's too many. But
Right.
I would love
It's a lot.
But I would love to sort of hear from you why you're interested in running, why you think it's so important, what you think the DNC can be as we move forward and kind of contemplate, the 4 years we have ahead of us. And I would just love to hear about your candidacy.
Well, thank you. It was a conscious decision for me to do it. Right after the election, I knew that I needed to do more. I was devastated, like many of us who had been on the trail, believed in the Biden-Harris ticket, believed in Democrats and how we could save our democracy, because we knew if we didn't, what would happen next. So after traveling as one of 50 people to serve on the Biden-Harris's advisory team, that November Tuesday came, and we lost. And it did not mean that when you lose one race, you give up on another. So I'm a bounce back kind of person. So I immediately thought, what can I do? I'm chair emerita of the Congressional Black Caucus, had probably, as Jim Clyburn would say, one of the most successful runs delivering the infrastructure building because I was able to negotiate within our family. Negotiating Democrats who are on opposite sides is a lot harder than when you're doing it in a partisan, way. And so I thought, the DNC. That's who we're going to have to look to. We don't have the administration. We don't have the Senate or the House. And so the DNC will be the deliverable for us. That will be the arm, whether it's raising our dollars, whether it's working with the candidates, the message, the legislation. And so I had been on the DNC during the Howard Dean era through the DLCC. And so I thought I enjoyed that, and I came to all the meetings. And so when I looked at the list of opportunities, I thought, I'm a great leader, but I'm a better follower as well. So I thought, DNC, Vice Chair of Civic Engagement and Voter Participation, Joyce Beatty, drop the mic, check mark, 10 thumbs down, toes down. That's me. I mean, I knew right away. I didn't want anything else. People said, well, what about the chair? What about this? That's it. My life has been committed to mobilizing young people, looking up to those who are more seasoned and working with them. But it also gave me a real opportunity to not only take my skill sets, but to look at all the things the DNC had done well and say, what went wrong? Let's use those lessons learned. Did we have messaging? Yes. I thought we had messaging. But was it the message the people wanted to hear? It wasn't the message the people wanted to hear. Did we have tactics? Yes. We knew about all of the technology and all of the things that from younger folks, progressive to more seasoned. But I say to my staff all the time, you're great. I have the best team in the world. But sometimes it's inside baseball that they're doing. How do you get the inside baseball to the outside baseball, where the person who's working in the bank, the person at the library or the grocery store will say, I understood that, and that's just what we need. I don't think we had that connectivity. We didn't get it quite right. And when you look at the Trump campaign, albeit all lies that they were saying what people wanted to hear, and they were saying it repeatedly. Don't worry, I'm going to take care of you. Well, when you're hurting, you want someone to take care of you. When eggs are $7 and $9, you want somebody to say, oh, I'm going to make the prices go back to when they were affordable, or I'm going to make sure that you don't lose your home. I took care of you like I did before. All a lie. But it was what the people wanted to hear. The rallies were simple. We laughed because he was simple. He was not telling the truth. And we were sophisticated and proud. We weren't bragging enough. And when we did, the language didn't fit what the people needed to hear, what they were asking for. And consequently, folks like yourself in media capitalized on that. They start saying black men aren't going to vote. Black men. And so then other black men may have started believing that black men weren't going to vote because they weren't getting what they needed. And so lessons learned, I think I have a great platform that includes young folks doing all kinds of creative things, like in your world, hackathons, bringing them back, where you put a core group of people together. And in a short period of time, thought leaders, including all kinds of thought leaders. The people on the street, they are game changers, thought leaders. Then having not only train the trainers, we do that a lot, and we do trainings, but how about getting folks like you were 20 years ago and putting you in a fellowship? Because there's something different than saying, I'm a volunteer, than being able to go back and say, I was a DNC fellow. I did the research. I was on the street. So being able to make sure that we look at not just the battlegrounds, we lost all the battleground states.
We sure did.
So what happened to the red states? What happened to those states? What happened to Ohio? We used
Yeah.
to be blue. We used to say, so goes Ohio, so goes the president. And that was a good thing because a Democrat was getting hired. So want to go back and reflect. You don't have to throw everything out, but you certainly have to bring a lot of new. We have to get people re-engaged, reconnected, excited, if there's such a word as re-excited. I don't want to say that it's all doom and gloom, because it's not. And I won't be that type of leader that throws blame and shade on everybody. They messed up, they did wrong, because it's over. But you must learn from those lessons and get people that hope that Vice President Harris did as vice president. And when she was on the campaign trail for president, they talked about hope and being happy, and people bought into it. People got excited. Not enough time to deliver, or maybe wrong time to deliver. But either way, let's not lose sight of that. Think about this, Carrie. She attracted audiences as large as they could get on day one. She raised more money. So how do we take that and figure out what the hell went wrong?
True.
And that's what I'm willing to do. I have the time to do it, because I'm not going to the White House as the liaison to the cabinet over there. I'm not traveling like I was with the vice president and the president. I've already done and had the biggest accomplishment that one can have as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and that's chairing the CBC. So I have time. I love traveling. I don't have children or family at home that I have to do. I can integrate this into taking care of my constituency at home, because this will be a success for them. And I think while all the candidates are great, I think my skills are unmatched. When you think of Ohio, a blue state, I was the first female, not black or brown. I was the first female. We needed to get over 50 members. We needed at least 51. We had 32 members. And in my time, I took us in those cycles to 54, delivered the majority, and raised more money than any other. By the way, they had all been men, than any other House leader that we have. But we had term limits. So I was in the well and I was out of the well.
That's
because
right.
hours later, my term was up. And think about it. I went to The Ohio State University.
I know. My alum, where I graduated from.
Yes.
Speaking of Ohio, what has happened to Ohio? Like, I often feel, in my era, I was there for like the historic kind of run of, in 2006, we take every statewide office. We pick up a bunch of seats, right? We expand the congressional delegation. 2010 was hard everywhere. Or 2006, 2008, Barack Obama wins. 2010 was hard everywhere. We lost. We had a very difficult cycle. Ted was not reelected and so on. But by 12, Barack Obama wins again.
Yes.
Sherrod Brown holds on to a seat over and over again. And yet in the last handful of years, but the demographics haven't changed sufficiently. Like using Ohio as a case study in this rightward swing that we're seeing everywhere around the country. What do you, when you look around, when you talk to your constituents, when you're thinking about Ohio, you're now the dean of the Ohio delegation, right?
Well, close. We have Marcy Kaptur.
Marcy Kaptur, excuse me. I forgot,
there.
of course.
But I like that title.
There we go.
So some days Marcy calls on me and we share it, because Marcy, of course, is far north and I'm below her. And when I was chair of the CBC, she had a lot of respect for that and continues to call on me and share advice, because we represent two different faces of our party. And that's what makes us a great team, because we put her issues and my issues. She's all about rural America. She's all about the poorest of her district. And I balance that with urban American. urban communities in the poorest of my district, but you can't leave out those people who work like you and have maybe a better life of exposure and opportunity than someone who hasn't had that exposure. So we're a good team.
That's wonderful. But what do you think happens in states like Ohio? We lost every battleground
Yes.
state. Ohio's not even a battleground state anymore. But what do you think is happening? Why aren't we connecting with voters? And it's one thing to come up with another message, but I think we also have a bit of a credibility issue.
Yes.
That we need to restore some faith and trust in Democrats. But how do you think about what some of the trends we're seeing around the country are?
I think is different in different states. If you take North Carolina, where there's 60,000 ballots that we're still trying to get counted, I think it's voter suppression. I think when you look at Ohio, let's start there. While we may not be like Alabama or Louisiana with the court cases, but we had our own court case. Think about it. We had to go to the Ohio Supreme Court because the state house drew our lines and they were thrown out. But the Secretary of State made us run on illegal lines for our district, and that's what we did. So at that point, they guessed wrong because we took out an incumbent in Cincinnati. Amelia Sykes won her seat, and Chantel was able to hold in her primary and her general, and so was I. So that was a good deliverable for us, but that wasn't the same thing in some of the other states. So I think we have to be smarter about looking at state house races. Because they are the ones with reapportionment. They are the ones that draw the congressional lines. And if we don't understand that unless we put all of our energies into the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, I can hardly even say that. 2025, and I'm still talking about reauthorizing a Voting Rights Act. And some of the younger generation will say to me, I think she's losing it because we vote. They have no idea that we don't have the full complement without getting it reauthorized. Republicans, and now with this administration, could do just about anything to set us back to the 60s. I think it's being more engaged, but I also think we've lost the spirit of farm team. And when you look at how successful we were, we had a buildup of younger folks coming along wanting to be an elected official because they looked at the Otto Beatty Jr. And they look at the Joyce Beatties and they look at all of those individuals that came along. And that's how we were able to get a Rich Cordray, and that's how we were able to have a Michael Coleman line up to be mayor. We should have tapped it that Michael then should have been a lieutenant governor, a governor, a little ahead of his time, unlike a Wes Moore that's here today. So I think it's not too late. I think we have to engage folks who are in our communities to see what I never saw. I never saw the White House 30 years ago. I never saw went to the Congressional Black Caucus because someone invited me when I was very young, and I never stopped going. But I was probably one of few in my group of folks. So we need to have things where we bring young folks to Washington. When I watch the 8th graders come, they get so excited. So why aren't we bringing those who have volunteered, those who've been on the ground to come and serve with us? And I think we need farm team. We need people to be excited. We need to teach and train people where we are in our history. See, my generation had the history of John Lewis and Martin Luther King and Fannie Lou Hamer, and that people gave their lives to vote. And somebody will say, I may go vote when the game is off. It would not have entered my mind or my parents when I was old enough to go vote. My mother took me to get registered to vote, and she said, if you don't do anything else, you will vote in every single election. And we need to get more. We have so many lawyers who are talented, but they don't think about the judicial system. And we need to put more people in the judicial system. That's how you get a Ketanji Brown Jackson, because she was in the system and she was able to clerk and she was able to get all of the experience she needed. So when the time came, we had people who were ready. And that's what I'm so fearful about. When the time comes in 2026, when the time comes 4 years from now, we need to have people in that pipeline who are ready. People like you.
Speaking of continuing to get ready for what's ahead, are you, forgive me for not knowing this, are you like endorsing a chair candidate?
I have not at this point, only because I am so entrenched into my race, which I am so excited about. There's 4 of us running, all friends, all good Democrats, but I'm the only one that's carrying their state. I have the entire Ohio delegation, which means 10 votes, and I can say that because I have people voting for me in their states. Yeah. So that makes me the only candidate to have that. Obviously, we're all good. But I think my skill set is unmatched. When you think about mobilizing people, the Ohio State University, largest single campus university in the country, and I was the senior vice president of outreach, mobilizing people, and part of it was on voting rights. The first person in my job that I brought was Jesse Jackson. I brought Jesse Jackson to come and talk to the students, and it was standing room only because I wanted them to know how important it was to vote. And then coming to Congress, I've traveled in this last cycle, and maybe we all have, but I've been a lot of places that I didn't see anybody but me. I was on a lot of buses through Georgia. Other members and other candidates, they weren't on that bus. So it's the right time. I am big on call time. I don't think you become a leader, and I don't think you raise the money that I've raised. I believe I have raised more money for my campaign, my congressional campaign, and so I have dollars that I can help use. I'm not asking people to donate to me as the only way that I can win this race. Also, we know fundraising is going to be huge. I believe I can help the chair do that because I've done it before and greater than any of the other candidates. But it's going to be exciting. I've gone to all the forums. I've listened to the chairs. We were just in Detroit, and we have some powerful candidates. I think it'll narrow down to a top 3. And then it's got to get to 1 in another 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's coming up soon.
It's coming up soon.
I would be remiss to ask, not to ask, sort of, I think your position as a member of Congress gives you such an interesting vantage point that we need to be thinking about because we don't have the White House, because we're in a rebuilding phase on an organizational level. Members of Congress are going to represent the kind of pulse of the party, the public face of the party in so many respects. How do you think about, or what are you anticipating this next Congress to look like with the new president? Has the caucus already decided on what priorities are? Do you have your own priorities?
Yes.
Sort of talk to us and me and the listeners about sort of how Congress is going to show up in this moment.
Sure. And show up is a good word. We're going to show up in all kind of bold ways and making a difference in delivering because, as you know, while we lost the House, we gained, which is historical, we gained members. We now have 215. For the next 130 days or so, the Republicans are only 2 seats ahead of us. So, and they have about 8 dysfunctional folks who don't agree on anything, who on any given day want to recall Speaker Johnson. He had to sell his soul to get the votes. And how embarrassing was that? So they have difficulty leading. From my hometown of Dayton, Congressman Mike Turner just lost his chairmanship, and we don't know if it was because he was with Trump or because he was at Mar-a-Lago. We just don't know what it was, but we know that wasn't a good sign for a speaker. And then conversely, you have Hakeem Jeffries, who basically is making all the shots and saving our democracy, keeping our government open, because they can't do anything without Hakeem Jeffries. And so that is a good time for us to be here, even though we're in the minority. Hakeem has put together an amazing steering and policy team. We have an amazing diverse leadership team. And going into our caucus meeting is a delight because we're united. Sure, we have our differences because Democrats have a big tent, but he's been able to pull that tent together by doing old school, new schools, following some of the successful things, but implementing his way. You know, many new freshmen are on exclusive committees, and they're getting the exposure that when I came, you had to wait 5 terms or a decade to even be in the room. And maybe I want to call that the Joyce Beatty model. Like I told you, if you're in the room, say something.
That's right.
Speak up. So he values and appreciates the talent. We will always have the voting rights, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act will be at the forefront. But we know there are national issues. We have to deal still with reforming immigration. We have to make sure that we protect our economy so it thrives, because that's what the American people are asking about. They're asking about the economy and how are they going to live and how are they going to survive. So we will have a good rollout of all of our priorities. We're just now bidding for our ranking members, our committees, our organizational meetings will start this week when we go back. So I'm comfortable and I'm excited. It's excited to be in the minority, which it usually is not, but it is because of our leadership and watching them squirm on the floor and watching the board when Republicans are voting with us to tear down their own speaker. And so we will get things passed. We'll prevail because of our leadership. And one thing I want to add, because you said something, and I think I fit well for the DNC position because I am in Congress. Because when you don't have the Congress, I can walk in those rooms. I speak both languages. I happen to be by my state voted in as a DNC member and a member of Congress. So I have a big platform. I have a big media platform. Just think about it. One of the baddest podcasts around, and I'm here. Think about it. Simone brought me on MSNBC and called it Breaking News with her and Michael Steele. Al Sharpton had me on his TV station to talk about the big platform that I could deliver. And at the Martin Luther King breakfast the other day, when he introduced the members, he said, if you want to be with somebody and be in a fight and have them stand up and bring people together, you want to be with Joyce Beatty. And that's the words of Al Sharpton. So I think my platform will be great for the DNC.
Amazing. A couple more questions. You something you said about, it's so nice to hear that being in the caucus is a delight. I think people ask me about politics everywhere I go, as you can imagine. And so often I get a lot of people expressing anxiety that Democrats feel really fractured, and we feel like we're constantly at each other's throats. And I always am sort of like, that's sort of the nature of having a heterogeneous party. That's the nature of the big tent. You shouldn't feel too dissuaded or discouraged by disagreements in the family. Like, that's not, I don't consider that something to be very worried about. But how do you think what you see in the caucus and how you lead in Congress can be a good example for sort of how Democrats can disagree well?
Yes. You can disagree without being disagreeable.
Yes.
I think it's the leadership. Hakeem is rare in some sense that you don't feel threatened, yet he's brilliant. His oratorical skills are amazing, that he captures you and captivates you in his words, but he also delivers. It's not a thing with him like we're seeing with Speaker Johnson threatening people, looking for an excuse to remove you. He simply calls you in and says, we're going to do what's best for the people that we serve and this caucus. And therefore, this is where I think you should be. And this is where we're going to put another person, because we're all part of the family. And it's worked. I mean, people have not gotten a committee, and you don't see the charade and the show that they're doing on the other side for not getting a committee that they want to be on. So I think it is he's strategic, and he has brought more people into the fold. He has call it like a cabinet meeting that when we meet and steering in policy, and there's people sitting there and said, I don't even know who this person is. They said, that's because they just got elected 2 weeks ago and sworn in. And they're sitting there with giants of the caucus, but they're a member. He makes you feel that the reality that it should be. Their vote counts the same as my vote or the same as a Maxine Waters or a Jim Clyburn's vote. And Hakeem has done that better than anyone. And I think that's how you get your unity and your power, because nobody feels like I can be in the room and can't open my mouth. It is the direct opposite. Old school is like what they told you. Yes, you can go, but you can't participate. You can't talk. When I was coming along, you could you couldn't be in the room. Yeah. They would tell you, you can come in and set up the tables, but then you have to leave. And so I think that's a big part of it. Feeling comfortable in the room, being prepared. Catherine Clark has done an amazing job of getting us the information. And Joe Neguse is one of my dearest friends in Congress, and he's just brilliant. And in his role as the assistant leader, he worked in communications on the DPCC, and he still has that in him. Here's how to message. Here's what you should do. Here's the strategy. And they all have the leverage and power to do their job. No one is micromanaged that you can't do this unless the big boss gives you the approval. And I think that makes a big difference because people are comfortable and it's a full house. If you don't get there early, you might not get a seat. And that's indicative of people wanting to work and be in the room.
That's wonderful. What do you think the biggest threat is to the Democrats' ability to, or the DNC's ability to sort of reconstitute itself in a way that allows us to win battleground states, to win elections, to lose both every battleground state and the popular vote has been pretty devastating. Right.
Not so sure we lost the popular vote.
Fair enough. Okay. We may have. So sure. But the fact that regardless, it was in striking distance, not particularly filling people with optimism. And I think the good thing of that is that there are real honest conversations about the fact that we need to rebuild, and that's great. But what do you think? Yeah, is there anything you're worried about? Is there anything that you
Donald
think?
Trump.
Yeah.
Autocracy, him being a dictator, some of the things that he's saying. Not sure if he really believes that he can do those things, but is he really running the country, or is it Elon Musk? We think that he gets a phone call, and when Elon tells him what to do, then he puppets it out. I think that's a concern for us, but I think for every concern there's an offset. We know we have to get it right. We know that we are also in striking distance 2 years from now, making Hakeem Jeffries the speaker. And that's going to give us the drive and the focus, because that also helps us 2 years later when we have another chance at the White House with the president. I think we have to figure out how to counter much of what he's doing, not as much for the Congress, but for the constituency, for the people back home. We have to build ourselves up, and I think we're at that space, but we're not there yet for all the people we represent. They're afraid, they're angry, they don't believe necessarily that we can do what they were promised by Donald Trump, or we would not have lost the number of votes that we had. We would not have lost in the groups. And people always want to talk about the brothers and what they didn't do. They also did a lot. We have to stop buying into it. We have to be realistic and honest. But we can't get on the bandwagon if a media outlet wants to tell us, because that's their job, they want to get the hype up and get people to listen and to watch, and I understand that. But we have to have our own hype. We have to get our folks to follow and believe in us a little more. So we have to give them something, and we have to give them what they want, and you can only do that by listening. And I want to make sure at every level, state reps, city halls, we need to listen, and we need to come together. And I think that will be the beginning of us starting to move and getting people excited to want to run, to want to serve. Because, if you just read what's in the paper or on social media, I don't think people really probably read the paper that much anymore. But if they're reading on their laptops and phone and believing everything, we have to do this more. We have to support media more. People want to beat up, media is the enemy because they trash us and people hear it and believe it. But we also have to lift up media. We have to give them the information and not be afraid of speaking truth to power. We have to be able to go on media and say, here, let me just tell you like it is. We lost. We messed up. I'm not going backwards. I'm moving forward, and we getting ready to make a difference. We have to give you the stories, our side of the story. And that's what Donald Trump did well. I mean, he fed into truth or lie. He fed it into the media. And so I think we have to do that versus only having a select few.
Yeah. I've been being in D.C., it's inauguration weekend, of course. I'm sort of shocked at sort of how, you're seeing everyone, they have their hats and their merch in the same way that we would have had she won. But I am shocked at how many young people I'm seeing. I'm shocked at how there's like this, they all think they're really cool, right? Like how being like a MAGA Republican has become really cool and kind of culturally trendy in a way that I feel like Democrats were the cool ones.
Right.
When I was young, like it was much cooler to be liberal. It was sort of weird and
but he's the movie star president, you're fired, from being on TV. He's not like a Ronald Reagan president. People like the bad boy, just like people liked President Carter, because he was about humanity, and people knew him from his brother in a peanut farm. Bush, somebody you want to go have a beer with.
Right.
And, Trump is, oh my God, he's the bad boy.
Yeah.
He's the one that takes on everybody. All lies. He's the one that's a multi-billionaire. All lies. More bankruptcies than anyone else. But nobody cares about that.
Yeah.
Only the part they hear and see. And they believe they can be like that.
Yeah.
Like we'd say to little girls, you can be like Kamala Harris one day. So kids are putting those little red hats on and thinking that they can be like Donald Trump. How sad that is, but it's true.
It's true. All right. Thank you so much for being here.
How exciting.
Anything else you want to say to the DNC members? You have a vote coming up in about 2.5 weeks.
That's right.
3 weeks.
I'm Joyce Beatty, and I'm running for DNC Vice Chair of Civic Engagement and Voter Participation.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here and for just everything you've done for me over the course of my career.
And it's mutual. Thank you. And just keep doing what you're doing.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.